Many months ago, I made the Monsters Unleashed retrospective where I mentioned Kei Kawade, Kid Kaiju, had really only one major animated appearance. That's what we're covering today. But first, let's talk about Future Avengers. Future Avengers is a series which follows the Avengers who are now mentoring teenage apprentices named Makoto, who was our resident anime hothead protagonist, Audie, who is our technopath who's trying to come to grasp with being raised and working for Hydra, and Chloe, who is a shapeshifter. If you think she's friends with Miss Marvel, congrats. There's also Bruno. We don't talk about Bruno. They were created specifically for this show. Then they were eventually imported into the comics. The first season dealt with Kang the Conqueror as he attempted to defy his fate. You see, he did take over humanity and waged war across the cosmos in his time period. However, since this show took place during the Inhumans push at Marvel, a spacefaring race of superhumans called the Inhumans forced him into a stalemate. The reason why he went to the past is that his own brand of Inhumans using the Emerald Rain project needed a large amount of vibranium, something the future lacks because it all got mined and processed to the point that he can't use it. Season 1 dealt with Kang, Season 2 deals with the Inhumans. This is where we begin our story. We don't know much about the Inhumans other than random superhumans are propping up. This episode's open where all disasters start, on oil rigs. Workers are trying to get readings when attacked by a kaiju. Then we cut to Makoto, who is walking past a boy who is drawing a kaiju. Makoto is voiced by Max Middleman, while Kai here is voiced by Bryce Papenbrook. Kai sketches a picture of a kaiju, which impresses Makoto. Kai reveals that the locals call him Kid Kaiju for his habit of drawing monsters. After showing off some of her kaiju, we get once more the decline of the secret identity. Because the Future Avengers tell him not to dilly-dally because they have battle training later, well, Makoto has to leave. Because, of course, he can say that. After Makoto leaves, Kai begins talking to his sketchbook, which actually responds to him. A monster attack happens in the middle of the street. I do like that they interlace Kai drawing with the monster attack in reference to the original comic, which opened basically just like that. And much like the original comic, the heroes are utterly ineffective at fighting kaiju. Chloe's tonfa are laughable. Audie redirects electricity from the power grid into the kaiju through his chain, which doesn't really do much. Makoto's power actually gives him enough of a punch to actually dislodge the kaiju, but that only pisses off the kaiju because dislodging and beating are not the same thing. The drill kaiju is about to turn Makoto into paste when another kaiju steps in. Bruno, Chloe, and Audie see, oh great, we have another enemy. Makoto has a different perspective. You see, that is the monster that Kai was drawing, and that monster just saved him. The drill-headed kaiju eventually bores a tunnel underground, while the dragon kaiju that saved Makoto basically disappears in a flash of light. Guess who is just around the corner? At Avengers Tower, the Avengers and Future Avengers mull over what the hell just happened. An oil rig in the Pacific was destroyed by a kaiju. An industrial plant in Central Asia was destroyed by a kaiju. An Antarctic research station was destroyed by a kaiju. All of this happened within the past week. All of these incidents involving kaiju attacks are ridiculously coincidental. And that's just the recent incidents. They show up and they disappear. Older incidents have apparently been happening for years, with a familiar face involved. This is not just a coincidence because he's been spotted at not one but 3 kaiju incidents and had to move every single time. Meanwhile, Kai's kaiju are getting antsy, wanting to act now rather than later. The Avengers believe Kai is responsible or at least mildly connected to these incidents, and honestly who can blame them given that he's been the epicenter of several kaiju attacks. I'm sorry, the way Makoto storms off, it's like he's wearing underwear like 3 sizes too small. It's just hilarious how he walks. Makoto hunts for Kai. Makoto manages to track him down to a baseball stadium, which is empty, and, well, no games are playing anytime soon. Unknown to him, the other Future Avengers are tracking the 2 of them. We get a nice conversation between Makoto and Kai over whether or not Kai is responsible for the attacks. And in true Marvel fashion, guess who shows up? Obviously, a giant dragon appearing sends mixed signals, which leads to Kai fleeing with the giant dragon and a fight. Thor strikes Slizik in the head with his hammer. Obviously, a giant slayer wouldn't have that much of a problem. This leads to Kai calling out the other kaiju at his disposal. Kai really does not want to fight here, and it shows. Thor even points out that maybe they jumped into this a bit too hastily, saying that he's dealt with helpful creatures with monstrous appearances before. And then Scrag finally talks, making the Avengers double take. And that's where the episode ends. The next episode opens with them talking to monsters and giving introductions. We also get Kai's backstory. We really don't know anything about the Inhumans yet other than mysterious mist that gives people powers and these random superhumans are popping up. Remember, made during a time when the Inhumans were being pushed as a substitute for the X-Men. So Kai, as far as he's concerned, one day drew a monster leapt from the pages, but enough talking. This episode ends up devolving into a giant fight scene and I live for it. At an oil field, we see another kaiju attack, and one at sea, one in the sky, and there's more where that came from. Time for a big giant monster fight. Against these alien leviathans, they really don't do much. So Kai returns his kaiju and merges them all into Smasher, even giving himself a nice cockpit to command them from. Breaking open the exoskeleton allows the Leviathan's power core to be exposed, something Tony takes full advantage of and unibeams, causing it to be destroyed. Tony laments the fact that the news is giving the kaiju all the credit. Also, he gave Kai and his family an island, courtesy of Stark Industries money. That's the end of that. These two episodes are fun to watch together. I'll give them credit for this. They did not adapt the comic directly because the comic basically went all in on the whole the end of the world is nigh bit with the whole Leviathan attack. What I do really like is that it's just Kai and Makoto having the bond rather than Kai and Elsa Bloodstone. I do like it that he has someone his own age to talk to over this stuff. Though the scale and the cast aren't the only things they took liberties with. You see, in the comics, there was a sixth monster Kai created, Fireclaw. Fireclaw was adapted out, though in the episode's defense, Fireclaw died in his first appearance, so a bit wasteful, if I do say so myself. I'm a bit disappointed that Kai's parents apparently didn't appear in the show either, which gives the impression that he lives alone despite both parents being mentioned multiple times, although not named. I also wasn't particularly happy that Iron Man got the final blow against the Leviathan. I much prefer the comics where Smasher merges and then is the one to defeat the Leviathan. But speaking of fight scenes, I do have some issues with what they shout. Being an anime, calling your attacks is nothing unexpected. However, what they call out tend to annoy me. Audie saying technical act, or Makoto saying aerial act, or Bruno shouting wing daggers doesn't annoy me as much as what they have the Avengers shout. What bothers me about what the Avengers shout is that they have very generic platitudes. Captain America yelling, "Shield throw." It's not the redundancy that annoys me. After all, Deku hitting someone yelling Detroit Smash is also redundant. No. It's when the name is so insipid that it doesn't exactly scream, "This belongs to this franchise." At least Unibeam being yelled is recognizable as a Marvel thing because that's sort of how pop culture has assimilated Tony Stark's chest laser. Everyone else is not right. It is especially jarring when it's Thor shouting really generic platitudes like Thunderstrike or whatever he shouts, because he's voiced by the same guy who voices Endeavor. Yes, the Endeavor who yelled plus ultra prominence burn. Really, it's just weird seeing very creative and I can say, oh, that comes from that franchise, to, okay, shield toss. Okay, the most famous person who does shield toss is Captain America, but why are we being redundant here? Can't we be more creative? Those are just my thoughts. Please consider liking, subscribing, tipping the channel on Ko-fi. This is Cyril signing off.